For our next team, let's go up to Manhattan, Kansas, and let's talk about the Kansas State Wildcats. Kind of a surprising record last year. I know they've lost 4 games kind of reliably the last few years,
Yeah.
but it didn't feel like an 8-4 regular season to me last year. And you look at the stats, and they were outgaining opponents pretty often. They were winning the little things, but just coming up short on the scoreboard somehow. So it feels like bad turnovers from Avery Johnson were
Yes.
definitely a factor in that. You mentioned the BYU game when we were talking about the Cougars. And yeah, just bad turnover luck, some injury mishaps here and there. But at the end of the day, you are what your record says you are in the Big 12, and 8-4 is how they shuck out. And they won their bowl game to get to 9 wins. But I think this is certainly a team that has higher aspirations this year, in year 2 of Avery Johnson being the starting quarterback. To me, the biggest question, and maybe the only question on the offensive side of the ball, is going to be, can he take that next step as a passer? I'll let
Yes.
you talk about Avery here in just a second, but the rest of the offense, to me, I know they lose DJ Giddens. I'm really excited about Dylan Edwards stepping up. It's going to me, it feels like DJ Giddens himself stepping into the Deuce Vaughn void a couple years ago. I think they'll be fine there. They have their leading receiver, Jace Brown, back, and they are rebuilding the offensive line a little bit. But our biggest concern about them last year was replacing 4 starters on the offensive line. And all they did was average over 6 yards per carry on the ground and only give up 13 sacks all year. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt on the offensive line until proven otherwise. But yeah, circling back to Avery, he had his moments, but just really, as a young kid, he was only a sophomore last year, still struggling to put it all together and really consistently be that passing threat that the Wildcats need. So, in your mind, do you think he can take that next step this year?
Boy, it's a question that may determine the Wildcat season and Kleiman's kind of trajectory with this ball club, because in the wins, Avery Johnson was awesome. 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions on the year. He could create first downs out of thin air with his legs. Really a fun piece to have leading your team as QB1. But it was his first year as a starter, and so there were growing pains. And there was a remarkable difference between Johnson's performances in their wins when the offense scored over 38 points a game, and in their losses when they didn't even get to 16 points per game. Johnson threw 6 of those 10 interceptions in 3 of those losses. The only loss that he did not throw an interception in was the Farmageddon game at the end of the year. Wasn't super efficient. I believe threw for less than 50% pass completion, but didn't turn it over. The offense just really couldn't get anything going in a 29-21 loss. So that's kind of what's in front of you as a Kansas State fan. And you've got to put a lot of trust in Matt Wells and this offense to allow him to take that next step. Now, you mentioned the offensive line, 3 new starters, or I'm sorry, yeah, I think is it 2 or 3 new starters, a couple new starters along the offensive line joining. Offense performed admirably last year, even with plug-and-play starters along that line, and Kansas State has a reputation of being able to build offensive lines really out of thin air. Last year, they were 11th in rushing. You kind of expect them to do a lot of the same numbers this year, not only because Dylan Edwards is back, who averaged almost 7.5 yards a carry last season, but they bring in Antonio Martin Jr. from Southeastern Louisiana. He rushed for over 1,200 yards last season as well. So they've got a dynamic backfield. Jace Brown is their leading receiver coming back, but they also add some big play threats. Jernan Bradley from Boston College, he was a Texas Tech transfer the year before that. And then Caleb Medford from New Mexico transfers in as well. That receiving trio collectively averages more than 15 yards per catch. Then the numbers are just insane. So not only are these guys able to create some separation down the field and get open, but then they're also able to elude contact, get those extra yards, make big plays happen. That's what you've got to be really excited about if you're a Wildcats fan, because if your running game does open up the downfield pass, it makes it a whole lot easier for Avery Johnson to complete those nice chunk plays if he's not having to throw into tight man coverage or into double coverage with that safety lurking over top. So there are a lot of ways I think Kansas State can kind of free Johnson up to cook. I think his legs are going to be an important piece as well. I'm excited to see how he continues to evolve as a dual threat quarterback. But yeah, the Wildcats offense, it's loaded. The question truly is going to be, will they disappear again? In those losses, like I said, less than 16 points a game, it just, for whatever reason, in the biggest moments, kind of felt like the wheels fell off. If they can get towards where they're raising the floor, that defense should be a lot of fun again, especially in the front seven.
I'll let you talk about the defense in just a second, but to me, this offense has been building to this year. This is Avery Johnson's junior year.
Mm-hmm.
He split time a little bit with Will Howard, and they let Will Howard go to Ohio State so that he could get reps last year and not leaving the transfer portal. They've been building this year. They've been building and accumulating talent, not just through the portal, but also they've gotten some big recruiting wins on that side of the ball recently. Avery himself was a big recruiting win. A lot of people around the country wanted him.
Sure.
They got the number one tight end in the country this year, Lincoln Cure.
Lincoln Cure.
And yeah, 5-star, number one tight end in the country. Don't necessarily expect him to contribute right away because tight end is kind of a hit or miss position for freshmen to jump in. It's a really difficult one to learn at the college level. But my point is that they're adding talent every way that they can on the offensive side of the ball. Jumping back to the defense, I agree with you on the front seven. I'm really excited about that. But it does feel like they've kind of underachieved on that side of the ball the last couple of years. Again, consistency has kind of been an issue at times. You look at some of their losses last year. I wouldn't necessarily say many of them were because of the defense. BYU especially, they're obviously the offense is shooting themselves in the foot, and the defense can't really do a lot about that. But, you have other instances last year, just times where you just can't get off the field consistently has been a problem for Kansas State. The yards rack up, the fatigue wraps up. What is the outlook there on that side of the ball this year in your mind?
Yeah, so the biggest loss that they had was Brennan Mott, who goes to the NFL. He's a San Francisco 49er now, and he was their leading sack artist. He was their biggest threat off the edge. They do return 4 of their top 6 tacklers, specifically when it comes to tackles for loss. And I think their linebackers are good. They've got Desmond Purnell, Austin Romaine are both back. So in general, I do like the front seven. I think they're going to be able to hold their own, and hopefully you'd like to see them continue to get into the backfield, especially in a conference where quarterback play is so key and there are so many veterans. You've got to be able to knock these guys off their schedule. Otherwise, they're going to pick you apart all day long. And that, I think, is maybe where this season is won and lost on that defensive side for Kansas State is the secondary. Secondary, 77th in total pass defense last year, but as you mentioned, unreliable at times. Sometimes they had a hard time staying ahead of the chains and preventing those first downs. They lose 4 or 5 starters from last season. So I wrote that it's either a chance to wipe the slate clean or it's kind of another reason that you maybe expect regression in this season. One of the names to know is Quay Moss, West Florida transfer. I believe he plays the nickel for them because at West Florida, he was not only a defensive back, but an absolute terror with tackles for loss, blitzing into the backfield and bringing down the ball carrier. So a very versatile piece that I think they really like on that back end, but a lot of questions, I think, for Kansas State, a lot to prove early for that secondary.
And they're going to get an early test with that secondary when they face Rocco Beck in Iowa State.
Sure.
Week 0 in Dublin, Ireland. So transitioning into their schedule with that, they have that week 0 game. I really don't like how this first 4 stacks up for Kansas State. Breaking down the schedule, they have, of course, the week 0 game in Dublin. There's going to be tons of travel fatigue involved with that. They come back and play North Dakota on a week's rest, which is fine. North Dakota's a challenging FCS team. You never really want to play a Dakota of any sort in your non-conference because they can jump up and get you if they're not careful. But of the Dakotas, I think they're the one that you would maybe want to choose. But then after that, they host Army. And you think about just the beatdown of travel, having to get up and play North Dakota, not really necessarily looking ahead to conference play just yet. But then the next week when they play Army, they've got conference play right after that. Maybe you're overlooking the Knights and you're sleeping on them, and they come into your house and really ram it down your throat a little bit. That's a difficult matchup. I hate playing option teams just as a principle. So just one to circle, one to keep in the back of your mind. But then after that, even to wrap up this 4-game stretch, it's a short week road trip
Yes.
to Arizona. So, like, it's just whoever designed the schedule, Big 12 office, the K-State AD, like whoever it was, just really was trying to make it about as difficult as possible to start the year.
Yeah, and it's interesting because going overseas, they do get that extra bye week. And so the schedule breaks into chunks that I think make conference play pretty manageable, but it is a very weird start. And yeah, you never want to play a service academy. You certainly do not then want to have a short week to go to Tucson at night under the lights where, listen, it doesn't matter how good Arizona is playing at night in front of their crowd. It's just some kooky things can happen in the desert. And so it's a very odd start to the season. But then I wrote that after that, the first conference chunk is UCF at Baylor and TCU for homecoming. Then it's Kansas and Texas Tech in a dangerous 2-game little burst. But then they get a final bye before the season finishes at Oklahoma State, at Utah, and home against Colorado. So if they can survive the front four, and if they can go 4-0 or 3-1, then I start to think that Kansas State is in the catbird seat because there's not any just egregious stretches. They're going to be able to stay fresh. They're going to be able to weather some of those wear and tear injuries. I really wonder if, despite some of the difficult opponents on their conference schedule, I wonder if the kind of the lion's share is truly in this first 4-week stretch.
I think it very well could be. There's definitely teams that are in the top half of the conference on the backstretch. You mentioned going to Baylor. I think going to Kansas is going to be really difficult, even though they've dominated that series recently. And then I'm looking at that November 22nd game at Utah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to play it in Salt Lake City, Utah, the week before Thanksgiving. That's going to be cold as heck. I know Kansas guys are different than me being from Texas, but like, I don't know. If I can avoid that, I would certainly prefer to not go to Salt Lake City in November 22nd. But they will be doing that this year. Look, this is a 10-2 type team. I think that, like I said, they've been building to this year. They have a 10-2 roster. They have struggled on the road under Chris Kleiman. They were 3-3 last year on the road, lost that weird game to BYU, lost at Houston kind of inexplicably last year. So road losses, weird road losses especially, that are no stranger to the Wildcats. So if that catches up with them again, I could see them being an 8-4 team again. But 8-4 kind of feels like hey, everything went wrong and we lost focus a couple times this year.
Yeah, and I think that could very well be the case. I've got Iowa State, I think, winning this game in Dublin right now. I mean, we're about to talk about the Clones, but I just feel like they're maybe a more complete football team. I have fewer questions about some of the foes on Kansas State's schedule. But like I have said in other past previews, just because I see a path to 8-4 in the under hitting does not necessarily mean that, that's going to happen whatsoever. This could be a 10-2 team. And if you buy into Bill Connolly's projections, he's got them winning the Big 12. He's got them as the outright favorite coming out of this, which is funny because his preview also mentions a lot of the questions that we've raised on our breakdown. So it was one of those things where I felt like my gut and the analytics kind of diverged a little bit. I'm obviously going to go with my gut here and say that they're an 8-4, 9-3 kind of team. But we may look up at the end of the year and, true to Big 12 form, Kansas State has gone 11-1 and reserved a spot in Jerry World.
I'm buying in on Kansas State this year. I'm going to take the over. I think that they will get back to Jerry World, and I'm mostly buying in on Avery Johnson. I think he's going to take a big jump in year 2 as a full-time starter. Drafted him on my first underdog best ball team. So I have a vested interest in him succeeding this year. Shout out underdog. Make sure that you draft some teams and use our code. Cha-ching.